cancel different things. There's been this long debate about this, about FCC using their powers to police speech with their licensees. They have this power. It's not new. What is new about it is using that very same power by a conservative against a liberal. The way I look at it as a traditional conservative is the FCC should not have these powers. It is a ridiculous thing for a government agency to be policing speech like this. But as for me as a conservative, Jimmy Kimmel is unwatchable. He is not funny. You will not have a single conservative say, I watch Jimmy Kimmel and I'm entertained. So he has his own brand, and I think him being removed from late night TV was about him being unfunny. Conan O'Brien, far funnier. As a conservative, I think he's much more balanced. Like the other Jimmy's better, his ratings are better. So, I mean, look, this is like, you can get into this whole debate, but the fact that the left out of Hollywood is going to come and fight the Trump administration, it's exactly what they want.
Well, but in that interview, Ted Cruz also made a very good point about speech, but then he said, if there is a Democratic president, what happens if they start going after conservative podcasts, Fox News, other conservative, potentially, hosts? And I think that is a very fair point. And I think the politics of this is interesting.
Well, the FCC doesn't regulate those.
They don't
entities.
regulate them, but I think an administration could potentially try to go after them, file lawsuits, et cetera. But what I will say about the politics of all of this is no longer progressives, the left versus the right. This is the left, and this is also the right, talking about free speech, with a small group of conservatives who are trying to make the case that this was a business decision. But there is a divide within MAGA right now about free speech and whether or not the government should be policing speech, given their history of really trying to stand up for speech. So I find it interesting that this is now a lot larger than conservative and progressive. There's progressives joining with MAGA on this in some ways.
Annie Carney, you cover Capitol Hill for The Times. I mean, this was Senator Cynthia Lummis talking to Semaphore Burgess Everett, who's, as you know, been up on Capitol Hill for a real long time. She told him this, quote, under normal times and normal circumstances, I tend to think the First Amendment should always be sort of the ultimate right, and that there should be almost no checks and balances on it. I don't feel that way anymore. How common is this viewpoint in the Republican conference, and what does it say about where we are?
That's a stunning statement. Like, she's saying, I don't believe that the First Amendment is the end-all, be-all. I'd say that I agree that there is kind of a divide. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, got in trouble this week for saying there's free speech and there's hate speech. And she got blowback from conservatives who said, like, sorry, hate speech is awful, but it's actually free speech. Like, it's not inciting violence. You don't have to like it, but it's protected. So there is a divide. Some people are on the Bondi had to clean that up. So some people are on the Bondi-Loomis side. Some people, even in the conservative movement, are fighting back against that. What I saw on the Hill this week was Democrats. A group of House and Senate Democrats came together to try and introduce a bill this week that would create more protections, more free speech protections. They are trying to make the case that Republicans are trying to tear down the First Amendment and that they are there to protect the First Amendment. There's no chance that this bill would be brought to the floor in either chamber, but it's a chance for them to look like they're fighting for the Constitution.
Well, Alex Thompson, I mean, you've covered Democrats for a long time. Obviously, many Republicans looked at what Democrats did in the years surrounding the first Trump administration and said, you know, it's Democrats that are policing free speech. It's Democrats who are calling the tech companies and getting them to shut down conservative viewpoints, among other things. Now they're trying to capitalize on it.
Yeah, but they're not framing it as much of a free speech. They're framing it much more as this is out of the authoritarian playbook. And they are much more focused on Trump using, yes, the government has these powers, but you haven't had a president use the levers of the executive branch in this way, perhaps, ever, but certainly not in the modern history of the presidency.
Are you comfortable with it, with what they're doing?
Well, no, but my brand of conservatism is not the brand of conservatism out of the White House. The president was one on the comeback trail of this was being canceled, and all significant administration officials from Trump 45 being actively pushed out of corporate America. When Ronna McDaniel couldn't get a contributor contract with MSNBC because their talent roared up against it, it showed that, the left is at cancel culture as well. What you see from this administration is saying, we've seen government power used against conservatives. We're going to use that same power against the liberals and liberal orthodoxy. That is it. What's at play? A conservative like me looks back and says, you know what? I actually don't want the government to have this power at all, not because it was liberal or conservative, the victim here, but because the government should not have this power.
Of media organizations. Take a look at Connett today and watch how the Republican chair of that committee reacted.
I motion today to subpoena Brendan Carr and to have him explain to the American people why he's bullying private individuals and private businesses. Mr. Chair, I hope you'll have him come in.
I think we could do that. I
appreciate that, sir.
We could. I don't think the motion's necessary, but I think he would. I'm pretty confident he would be willing to come in to testify. So,
well, thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I didn't honestly expect that either, exactly. And don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of Republicans out there who are twisting themselves into pretzels to defend Trump's attack on protecting free speech. But a number of them don't seem that eager to get behind him on this one. I mean, maybe it's because they realize that their party has spent the last 4 years, probably even longer, complaining about censorship, decrying so-called cancel culture, and expanding the definition of free speech to include issues like, say, whether or not private social media companies can kick you off their platform, even when you lie about vaccines during the height of a global pandemic. Republicans like Ted Cruz understand that it is the height of hypocrisy for them to now turn around and support a literal government-backed censorship campaign. Now, a few months ago, I would have probably told you not to expect longtime MAGA Republicans to break with Trump in any meaningful way, no matter how much he overreaches, no matter how much that contradicts what he does contradicts their own past positions. And for the most part, MAGA Republicans have stayed in lockstep with Trump, even on some of his most heinous and most absurd decisions. But there is an extent to which some MAGA members realize that they cannot just rev their base up about something and then just drop it as soon as it is inconvenient for Trump, because that's not good for them politically, and that's what it's really about here. And so we have seen rare moments when conservatives decide to break with the president and even stand kind of on the side with Democrats. Now, we don't know if that will happen here in any big number, but we do know it is possible because we are seeing it happen elsewhere. I mean, today the House Oversight Committee met behind closed doors for 6 hours to question Alex Acosta, the prosecutor who gave notorious child sex predator Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal to keep Epstein out of prison. Now, that is the same Alex Acosta who Donald Trump appointed to be his labor secretary during his first administration, after that sweetheart deal was made, by the way. So my guess is Donald Trump isn't exactly thrilled about having Acosta's name back in the news, of course. But the Republican-led Oversight Committee held this deposition anyway. And while Speaker Johnson and the majority of Republicans are still carrying water for Trump over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, Republicans like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene have banded together with Democrats to try and force the release of the Epstein files. And we have now all seen this damning image of what appears to be Trump's signature in the Epstein birthday book, thanks to a Republican subpoena of the Epstein estate. You know, the one with the creepy poem where Donald Trump said the two had certain things in common. There it is on the screen. And though you would be hard-pressed to find a Republican willing to admit that that is Trump's signature, which obviously it is, they have not given in to his demands to stop investigating this issue. They know they cannot tell their base that they have completely given up on this. That's what this is about.
Ted Cruz, to give him full kudos, to give him a standing ovation, but we'll give him one clap for that, and I'm happy that he's out there saying it.
You're giving the Nancy Pelosi State of the Union clap for that one.
A snap, maybe a snap.
To your point, he is not the only Republican who's been talking about this. Let's take a listen to what other Republicans have had to say.
Yeah, people are getting fired. Free speech doesn't mean you don't have consequences for your speech. Like, free speech means the government shouldn't fully step in and say, hey, you can't do this, right? But, and again, licensing is a different question.
Do you think comments from the FCC have in any way chilled freedom of speech? The decision to take Jimmy Kimmel off air?
I think Jimmy Kimmel was taken off air because he's a unfunny activist.
Do I think it's good that Disney yanked his show? Yeah, I do, actually. That was their choice.
But using the power of the government to regulate speech. I mean, you guys were concerned about Biden doing some things like this, but this is even further.
Well, wait, this isn't the government, Mono. This is Disney.
Okay, I just want to follow their logic for a second, because it's not like let's say he was unfunny, right? It's not that he turned unfunny on the same day that the FCC chair just happens to say we can do this the easy way or the hard way, and then Nexstar changes their mind.
Oh, they are so desperate for the subject to change here because this tap dancing is really obvious. But what's also obvious is just the dramatic shift they have made about cancel culture. I mean, these were the folks that were saying in an election less than a year ago that the other side are snowflakes. The other side will want to cancel everything you're saying, all this woke stuff. One could actually argue it was a relatively significant issue in the last election. And now, just because Donald Trump has said something, they haven't read one poll that shows this Jimmy Kimmel issue is a good one for them. In fact, it's obviously massively unpopular. But just because Donald Trump said something, they are all falling in line and falling on their sword. So it's yet another indication that they will even commit political suicide just in strict subservience to him as fully owned subsidiaries of Donald Trump and MAGA Incorporated.
Tim Miller, I've only got about 30 seconds left, but I do wonder if you think...
So Jimmy Kimmel has absolutely torn the GOP asunder. His attack, Trump's attack on Jimmy Kimmel, has united opposition to Trump and divided his own side. So everybody, including a lot of conservative-leaning comedians and types like that endorsed Trump or at least seemed amenable to Trump during the election, are now turning against him, saying everything that we worried about, Harris was going to cancel culture us. Well, now Trump's doing it, and doing it far worse than we could ever fear from Biden or Harris or Walz or whoever the Democratic nominee would have been, the Democratic president would have been. It's much worse than that. And so you're seeing broad unity in the camp of Kimmel. But on the GOP side, it's civil war. You have, on the one hand, you have Trump and you have Pam Bondi and you have some Republican senators all of a sudden saying, well, maybe cancel culture is good, actually, right? Maybe free speech is bad, actually. Maybe it's perfectly fine and normal that we censor our opponents in ways far worse than we ever could even dream of them doing to us. But that's not everybody. That's the thing, right? There is that in the GOP. You're seeing that. But again, we've talked about this. Ted Cruz. Some right-wingers in the media. You see Candace Owens. Somebody I'm not normally a fan of, I gotta be honest. Saying, and this is her interpretation at least. You don't have to agree with it. Saying, Charlie Kirk loved free speech. Whether he did or not, put that aside. We're not talking about that. Saying Charlie loved free speech. And now we have his legacy being tarnished when Republicans in his name use that to violate free speech. So, guys, all Trump has done is created yet another front for a GOP civil war. You have Democrats, you have progressives, moderates, socialists, everybody on one side, even a lot of conservatives, united in favor of free speech. And you have an increasingly small MAGA cult united in favor of Trumpian censorship. That's a bad combo for Donald.